Hi everyone, my name is Adam from Pactimo. I'm the brand PR manager here, and I'm joined today with Leah Goldstein. She has an amazing story. I'm very excited to talk with her today. She's an internationally sought after speaker, world champion kickboxer, Israeli undercover police officer, national cycling champion, and Pactimo rider. I could go on and on. But basically, I really wanted to talk with you today, Leah, to talk through mostly your training philosophy, your no limits approach to life, and essentially just how that attitude has been cultivated over the last I think your whole life, basically. So thank you again for joining, and
For
let's dive
having me.
in.
This is great.
Well, maybe we could start with, I know that you said you grew up in an immigrant household.
Mhm.
I know that is probably a very interesting upbringing. I'd love to hear more about that and how you kind of were raised, and maybe if that affected you to become the person that you are today and the mentality that you've brought to cycling in your whole life.
Well, yeah, my strong foundation started when I was a kid because my parents came to this country. My father was born in the Soviet Union. My mother was born in northern China.
Wow.
I was in the oven. My sister was 5 years old, so it was challenging. My dad had $100. That you know what I mean. That's
Man.
how we started, right? And even right from a get go, I mean, my English wasn't very good. I had a
Hmm.
learning disability, put in a special class. And on the physical side, my left leg was growing at a faster rate than my right leg. It's longer, stronger. I can't bend my foot properly. So doctors told my parents that I'd never be an athlete, that anything in athleticism would never happen. So there
Wow.
you go. It started right from there.
Well, obviously you were able to overcome a lot of those challenges. I mean, so when you turned 17, that's when you became you said the champion boxer, right? I'm trying to remember the
Well,
exact
let's
name
back
of
up
it.
a bit. Yeah, where the martial arts started because
Uh-huh.
when you're different, you don't speak English very well, you have a bit of a limp. I had braces and pigtails. I was bullied, right? And that's kind of where the taekwondo, the martial arts came in
Hmm.
because, back in the day we couldn't tell our teachers about issues and my father always said, don't run away from your problems, don't run to people when you have an issue, you solve it yourself.
Right.
So I discovered Bruce Lee, and that was my solution to the bullying. And that's how the Taekwondo started. Because I
Yeah.
enrolled in Taekwondo, and by the time I was 12 years old, I was a junior national champion.
Wow.
And then at that age, boys and girls fight together because basically the strength is so you hit puberty, right? And then at that, and then beating all the boys, I said this is not challenging anymore, right? So that's where the kickboxing. We live now on the west side of Vancouver, and I
Okay.
found a kickboxing studio way out in Skid Row, and
Hmm.
that's kind of how it was the birth of my kickboxing.
And then I read something about how you were approached to basically create the next version of Karate Kid or something like that as a
Well,
film,
yeah,
right?
that's right. I actually, well, when I won the world championships at 17, I was undefeated, right, at this point. Because my skill was very good, right? They quoted me as that I fought more like a man than just like a cat fight, where I was very clean. I had very good skill because
Hmm.
my father was a national champion in boxing. So
Okay.
he taught me a lot of what he knew. And I grew up with boxing. I mean, I never watched hockey or soccer on TV. We watched boxing, and my father's very animated. So I
Huh.
used to copy him, and he used to explain why they stand the way they stand. So you mix the two together, you get a really good fighter, right? Um,
Hmm.
so after that, I did. We had interest from actually Paramount Pictures of making a female version of the Karate Kid, which I rejected. Right.
Yeah, and I heard that over time, then you decided you wanted to then go back to Israel, right? Which is where,
Well, that's the
or
reason
part
why,
of, yeah.
because I wanted to work for intelligence. That was my dream from as young as I could remember, 7 years old.
Okay.
Right. So my goal was after this kickboxing, career or whatever, and I graduate, I would go back to Middle East, go into the army, and then hopefully get into some form or some branch of intelligence.
Okay, cool. And so in that, I guess throughout that process, you then also probably experienced quite a bit of the same stuff, the bullying, the overcoming tremendous challenges. And I think that your philosophy was just to dive right into that and to become one of the first female elite commando instructors, right? Or the
Well, that's it.
first.
I mean, I had issues with having the super nice Canadian mentality. They thought that I would be shattered immediately coming into the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, because I was put into a special unit called, Base 8, which is a military intelligence base. And
Hmm.
I think they thought that all Canadians are super soft, too nice, and we couldn't handle it, right? So they were concerned if I could, um, survive that kind of environment, right? But
Mm.
in certain courses, I ended up graduating in the top third, and as you said, I was the first female instructor to train the commando. So I had a very important job, and um, done many secret stuff even in the military, which kind of launched me into go into intelligence outside of the military.
Okay. So I guess one big question I've had, that just through reading your bio and speaking with you, and I feel this energy from you, that you're able to really overcome really anything that's thrown at you despite what others say. And I think that especially in the midst of all this, like with a lot of people staying at home, not really knowing like how certain their futures are, um, people similarly right now are feeling this, maybe a feeling of anxiety or a feeling of like I can't get out of or control, the future. And I think that through these examples that you felt, throughout life, you've been able to approach that in a very interesting way that maybe not many people think of similarly. So I want to know if you can somehow digest, how did you come about cultivating this sort of a mentality? Is it something you were just born with? Is it something that you got through random interactions with people and mentors? How did this kind of mentality of just fighting forward really
Well,
come
I
to
think
be?
everything was like kind of a challenge in my life, and life is tough. I mean, that's how it is, and you're gonna fail multiple times. And the thing is, you have to accept failure because failure is part of success. I mean, how many times have things gone south for me, right? But
Mm,
that's the key right there. Is a lot of times when we don't succeed, we just throw in the towel, and that's it. We don't, and then and patterns are often repeated, right? If you do it once, you're going to end up doing it multiple times, right? Like even let's go into my pro cycling career, for example, right? It took me 10 years before, I got to the point of where I wanted to get to. And even the cycling community said, it would never happen for me. I mean, I got in at 30 years old, right?
mm,
But quitting is never an option for me, because if you quit, you're going to regret it. And your biggest fear shouldn't be failure. It should be regret in the future. And I think
right.
that's it. I'm not afraid to fail.
Well, I think that's not something that everybody always feels, right? They don't easily dive into that fear. I think, but you're completely right. I think that there's one way that you can live, which is never really knowing what your full capacity is, and the alternative is at least trying and being hurt and failing along the way. But at the very least, you were able to reach some sort of conclusion and see how much your body can take. You know.
Well, I mean, you have to ask yourself, like, in the moments where you want to quit, you have to ask yourself in those particular moments, well, how will I feel next week? How will I feel next month? How will I feel next year, knowing that I had this opportunity and I just gave up because things went terrible, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
So you have two choices. Either you can suck it up, you know what I mean, fight for it, and keep crawling wherever you're trying to get to, or you can quit, right? But I
Right.
can promise you will regret it because, like I said, regret is your biggest failure of anything, right? It's not
Absolutely.
failing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you try multiple times, right? But think about it. This makes you that much stronger, right?
Hmm.
Because you hear people who are successful. It didn't just come to them. You got to hear their backstory, and then
Hmm.
you'll be thinking, holy crap. So it's not you can hear anybody else who's super successful in whatever they've chosen to do,
Hmm.
listen to their backstory, and then it will give you new perspective of what success really is.
Right. Right. Well, it seems like it's mostly just never stopping and getting after it. I guess is the only way I can conclude to it. But maybe we could go back a little bit and talk through that process and how it's been for you, because I know now that you're currently racing to break the record for Race Across America, right? You won it back in 2011, and so I'm wondering from your perspective, it sounds like there's no sign of stopping for you. You're going to keep trying to raise the bar, because I think you do have these past experiences of either failures or successes that you've built up to that now are, you're constantly thinking about, well, where can I take this more and more and more? So I'm wondering, when was that first moment for you when you kind of realized that this dynamic is going to exist? And then how did you kind of slowly build up to where you are today?
I mean, I think with everything you do, you learn. It's a learning. Like, John Howard's my coach goes, it's either you win or you learn, right? And
Yeah.
even back in 2011, when I first did Race Across America, I mean, it was my first go. We didn't know what we were doing. My crew was new. I was new. I got Shermer's neck, and I still ended up winning, right? But there were so many mistakes that we did, and things that I learned on route. But I retired then because I was done. I was already racing 15 years, coming out of pro racing, and then bang right into ultra endurance racing, right?
Wow.
So 8 years had gone by. I wrote a book. I started speaking. But then I had this niche on the back of my head is, that Race Across America. I'm cut out to be an ultra rider. I knew it. Even as a pro racer, the longer, the harder the race, I always got better and I
Mm.
recovered really fast. And I
Wow.
thought, what if I could figure this out, the neck thing, and train better and smarter if I went back to Race Across America and able to break that record even at 50 years old.
Wow.
I
Wow.
just turned 50 last year, by the way.
Well, awesome. Yeah. And how is training going? Is it better than before? Or how do
Well,
you
let me
feel?
I did RAAM last year, and so
Uh-huh.
with the course being about 150 kilometers or 100 miles longer, I
Hmm.
ended up doing it approximately 15 hours faster.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we still did multiple mistakes with navigation. I came to the line a little bit overcooked. So you learn again. I mean, to me, it's a little bit, I mean, we succeeded well. I mean, I did lose first place only by 90 minutes, right?
Jeez
And
Louise.
mind you, too, the two 50-year-olds came in a full day ahead of the 30-year-olds, right? So there you go. Age is just a number. But
Yeah.
to go back to that is I've learned a lot from the mistakes we did last year to try and correct it this year. Now, of
Okay.
course, with COVID, it's been canceled, right? Or
Right.
that doesn't stop my motivation. It means, okay, now I can come even stronger next year, right?
Right.
So the whole perspective thing is keeping the motivation and the training and the goal, right? Because you'll get there. Like we all now are in this point. We're all kind of in jail in our houses,
Yeah.
you know, but that shouldn't dampen your motivation to try new things or continue your projects that you have to hold back because of what have happened, right? Think about new ways and new ideas that can make you stronger and even better and really plan for what's ahead because this will end. This will all at some point it will come to an end. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to get new ideas and to get remotivated and plan for when this all ends. And the
Right.
idea is not to go get too dampened right now and get into this hole. Because once you get into that hole, damn, it's really hard to get out of it.
Yeah, of course. Has that ever happened to you when you've gotten into that hole like you're describing? And I kind of want to hear more about like a particular moment because I'm sure there's several when you've been like even in Race Across America, like you were saying, like you had Shermer's neck, right? Like into day 4. Like
Yeah.
that right there is a very big reason to potentially stop because it
Oh,
could be incredibly bad for you into the rest of your life. And
oh,
so
I
I'm
mean, it wasn't day 4, it was day 3 where the neck
oh
dropped, right?
man,
So, I
okay.
mean, it was unbelievably painful. I mean, the solution, what they did in order to keep my head up, is they shaved me from year to year. And the remainder of the hair that I had on top of my head, they took tensor bandage, they French braided it into my hair, and they pulled my head back and tied it to the back of my heart rate monitor.
Oh my
Forehead,
god.
right? And the pain was excruciating. I mean, we were alternating Aleve, Tylenol, and Advil just so I'll get through this, right?
Oh
And my
man.
crew said, how are we going to get across the country? You're not going to, it's not going to happen. And I said to them, I don't care if I have to crawl across the country. I've never quit anything in my life, never, right? So, like I said, at that moment, I said to myself, if I quit now, I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life, or I can suck it up, be in pain for 7 days, and at least say I gave it my best shot, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
did is I sucked it up, I gave it my best shot, but I still end up winning. in 11 days and I don't know, 14 hours, or give or take some, which wasn't terrible. But you even learn from there. I mean, even the mistakes that we did from that point, you carry it on to your next project. And for me, I mean, it took 8 years before I've come out of retirement, but I've learned from 2011 what I need to do now, like in 2021 in this case, right? And even from last year, the mistakes that I did last year, I'll correct them for, 2021. I mean, I think it's really proving the power of possibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That, when we say we can't do things, I don't think there is such a thing as we can't, is that we don't want to do things, right?
Yeah.
And I also think we don't we don't prepare for the hardships that could come with anything we choose to do. And that's the biggest obstacle, is getting through that. Getting to the top that's the easy part when you're there. It's the journey to get there. And that's what I think people aren't prepared to do, right? Is that things aren't, like I said, life is tough and it sucks, right? But what I know for sure, that if you do have the ability to get back up every time you get punched, kicked, knocked down, then your possibilities to do anything are endless. I live in Canada, so you better get used to the trainer. Because you're not going to ride it when it's minus 20 outside, right?
Right.
But I mean, when you think about it, for a race across America, I mean, like when you're going through Kansas, for example, all you see is road. That's it. There's nothing else, for 40 hours, right? So being on the trainer and just staring at a white wall is really good mental training, right? And I think I've always had that approach of, because mind you too, I mean, I don't use television. I don't listen to music. I don't look at my phone. I sit on my trainer and I just do what I'm supposed to do, right? So I have no stimulation to keep me interested, right? Which makes it that much harder, right? So I kind of replicate what it's going to feel like in the race to my training. The same thing, and if you're pro racing, I mean, the virtual whatever races are great because that's more realistic to what you're doing. You see other people and stuff, but we can't draft. If we see anybody, we have to let them go. So that's not realistic to what I need to do. So trainer stuff, I mean, honestly, I can sit on a trainer for 10, 12 hours. That's not difficult for me, but that's part of my race, part of Race Across America. Right. So it's not an issue at all. And adjusting, yes, I'm going to say that more trainer stuff in the nice weather because of the situation. I mean, I don't like to go out too far. If you think about it, if we crash, plus potentially going to the hospital, taking a bed or having to use a ventilator, you'd feel horrible. Right. So just because of that, I'm doing more indoor stuff. Right. And if I do go outside, like I said, I stick more to the local areas where it's a bit more safe. And mind you, there is less cars out there now anyways, right? So it is a little bit safer to be out there. Well, I mean, I think for one, when you go indoors, you can keep your workouts a little bit shorter, right? So you can do more intense, and really have a plan of what you're doing. Like if you're doing intervals and if you normally warm up, let's say for 45 minutes outside, just do a 30-minute warm up on the trainer and you can do your intervals, which is, I think, almost more difficult on a trainer, right? Because there's no interruptions, there's no lights or whatever to worry about cars. Keep your workouts short, a little bit shorter than what you would normally do. Keep it intense. But I think the biggest key is really having a routine for the day, right? Is knowing what you're going to do. Have a list of things that you're going to do aside from doing your workouts. Is maybe try something new. You know what I mean? Try learning a new language and learning a new cooking thing, whatever, or something that you've never done before that might interest you. But I think really having a routine every day will help you get through, this challenging time. And another thing is get outside, like even for a walk or whatever, you need to have some kind of fresh air, some sunshine. It'll make you feel better. If you're not going to go for a ride, then go for a walk, right? But I think just having a routine daily will be more efficient, make you feel better than just sitting there and wondering what you're going to do next, right? And plan for when this ends, like what's going to happen when this ends for you. Well, like I said, I like to replicate the race as much as possible. So, because with Race Across America, as you know, that in a 24-hour period or a 48-hour period, you're only sleeping from 0 to 3 hours, right? So in this last race, I mean, I went through the first night, then into the second night, you sleep a couple hours, and then every 24 hours after that, you're sleeping between 90 minutes to 3 hours. Now, I don't know if you've ever had your brain go wacko on you, but that's when you start to hallucinate, right? You know? So, I mean, so you try to replicate that a little bit here. So what I did the same thing here is I would train, sleep 3 or 4 hours, a little bit longer, and get back on the bike, right? Because it really gives you, it prepares you for what's going to come, right? You know what I'm saying? And the body reacts differently when you're super tired and you want to sleep, but you have to keep pedaling. So, and it's a build up, it's a slow build up. But I'm just going to say too that with Race Across America, it doesn't suit everyone, because if you don't have the ability to function on very little sleep, it's going to be very difficult, and most likely you won't be able to finish it. You have 12 days to finish it, don't forget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just riding your bike, you're racing your bike under extreme conditions. And think about everything that's going to happen to you: back, neck, knee, constipation, diarrhea, incredibly bad saddle sores, right? And you have to learn to deal with all of that, right? So basically you have to learn to be uncomfortable, being comfortable for the next, 9, 10, 11 days. Well, that's how you have to be, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you have to be one of those people that says, let's just do it anyways.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, right?
That's amazing.
And that's a RAAM rider, though, right? Somebody who does ultra endurance racing. I mean, they're kind of wacko a little bit, right? You know what I'm saying? But they can put themselves into this mode, right? You know what I mean? And it's just straightforward. That's all you see is the road, and you know that all you have to do is pedal, and your goal is to get to the finish line, despite how you feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel pain, well, too bad. It's you're going to feel that pain and whatever right to the end. So really, it's not so much a physical thing. It's really, I'm going to say, it's 99% mental. Like, honestly, they compare the Tour de France, for example, with RAAM, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, there is no comparison, because you're talking apple and oranges, right? And it's not just because you're a great cyclist that you can be an ultra endurance racer or rider, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a completely different animal, Like I said, you have to have that ability to push yourself beyond your limits, the ability to completely ignore pain, and the ability to stay functionable on next to zero sleep. And if you don't have those qualities, yeah, good luck. Actually, you're right. They do come from pretty extreme backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you think of the mental strength you need to do some of these races, right? Really to test I mean, if you feel like you want to do something ultra, I would go into like a 500-mile race. There's many of them, like the RAAM qualifiers, because you can't just go into Race Across America and say, well, I want to race it. You have to qualify.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll know then with those smaller races if you were cut out to do this. Because, I mean, honestly, if you can't do a 500-mile race without getting off the bike, then I wouldn't even think about doing Race Across America, because it's expensive and you won't finish it, right? I mean, you'll get to day 4 and you'll tapping your shoes together like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, saying there's no place like home, I used to commute on my bike from where I lived to the base. And actually there was a lieutenant there. He was a national champion in the sport of triathlon. And he noticed me. He noticed that when I wasn't training the troops, I was always training myself, because we had to be super fit. We don't stand there with a clipboard. We do the training that the commando needs to do, because we're sent to desolate places all over the place, and you have to go with them, right? You're part of their instruction, So he asked me, do you want to try cycling, like on a more, professional level, we'll say, right? So he took me on this bike ride. And then he introduced me to the sport of duathlon, because I loved it, by the way. It was something that I loved doing, and I got good really fast. And, within a year, I was a national champion in the sport of duathlon, and I won my races primarily because of the bike leg. I mean, I was a good runner, but not a great runner, because we run with packs, heavy stuff. So not necessarily fast, but long, right? And so that's kind of where I got the itch for cycling. But it wasn't just pro racing, because there wasn't any of that kind of sport in Israel at the time for women. There was for men. There was only duathlon. So that's kind of how the whole cycling thing started with duathlons. Okay. No, I actually I was competing in duathlons, and then I was at that time, I was about 10 years now. I'm now 30 years old, and I was working for a branch of intelligence called the Belush, right? And at that moment, I remember sitting in the car at the one point saying, you know what, I want to leave this, dream job of mine, and I want to just be a professional cyclist at 30 years old, because it was the only thing that really made me feel alive. And I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I was a bit delusional about what this whole, job really involved, and who I really was as a person. I was an athlete. So that was my decision to leave, was when I was working for the Belush. Yeah, I was very delusional. I mean, in Israel, I was the big fish in a small pond. And I'm a shrimp in an ocean, right? I got my ass handed to me. I mean, I didn't have any competition there, so I thought I was better than what I was, right? I mean, honestly, I would go into these races. I mean, people, if you remember in my era, and I would come in so last that I wouldn't even know where the finish line was, because everybody would leave. I'd see my car in an empty parking lot. I go, okay, this must be it. It was humiliating. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. I had a tough go. And it was actually the first time that I was failing at something, right? You know what I mean? I just couldn't, but I so loved the sport and I so wanted to succeed. But oh my God, I'm going to tell you, with everything I had done in my life, nothing beat the crap out of me more than cycling. It really taught me what the human body is capable of doing. Wow. Because I'm telling you, it took me 10 years to finally get to that point, that I wanted to, this rider that I wanted to become was, and Peter will remember this, right, from Pactimo, right? Mm-hmm. He was my director of how I struggled to really succeed in this sport. Well, Peter was my director. He was with Bianchi at the time, and he was my director, I think, for 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure, but we always kind of stayed in touch, right? I retired, and then when I decided to make my comeback, and he also sponsored me when I exited pro cycling into ultra endurance racing. He backed me. He sponsored me as an ultra rider, and then I said I retired. 8 years had gone by. Then I wanted to kind of see if I could get my sponsors back, right? Even with this old lady saying I want to come back on the bike. So, I mean, I had very positive response from everybody who supported me way back when. And then Peter, right away, he says, what can I do to help you? And then he was just coming into Pactimo too. Huh. And at the Vegas Expo, the bike show or whatever last year, I got to meet the team, and they were so super supportive and said, whatever you need. And that's kind of how the relationship built. Well, the book, actually, the funny thing is the rumor started writing a book was when I came back from the Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. But I couldn't say a lot because I just left a very secretive job, right? You know what I mean? I couldn't expose what I was doing, and people that I knew were still working. So that had to be on hold for another 5 or so many years after I came back from Israel, right? So, mm-hmm. I mean, the book took 10 years to write because I actually took the writer back to Israel to meet my commanders and lieutenants and, to go back to the base where I served at, to meet people that I worked with. So it was very intense because I wanted to be really authentic, right? So that's why it took so long to write the book, because we needed clearance on certain stuff. And there's just so much material of what we're actually going to put in there. So the book is a success. People love it. I mean, it's being picked up now by Lori Lazinski, who's a producer here in Canada. They're trying to bring it now to the big screen, aside from the documentary, right? I wanted the documentary last year with Race Across America, kind of the lead up and what it takes. And then they wanted to go deeper into my background, to make it a little bit more interesting, not just another cycling story, right? Because there's many documentaries about RAAM, right? So just like a bit of a twist in there. So that's what's kind of on the go right now. The idea was to release it after RAAM 2020, but of course, as you know, it's been canceled. So the new plan is now for next year, for 2021. I think through Facebook is probably the best, or Instagram, our website, www.leahgoldstein.com, kind of follow, see what I'm doing, right? Those are the best probably links to connect with me or to follow what myself and what my team is doing right now. Well, I have an amazing team. I mean, I have the same people who basically, started in 2011. I connected all of, back with them because I have a great, great crew chief, a great, supporting crew chief. I have a physiotherapist. I have a doctor on board, just a great group of people that are there to really push me to my limits. Right. And just them, sacrificing their time, right, and being yelled at for nothing sometimes, and deprivation and crappy food, and not being able to sleep properly for 10 days, right, and still coming back to do this again and again. So I have to say that I'm very lucky, and I love them all, and I owe them big time. Approximately 9 people.
Okay.
For like IV, you have a massage therapist. You have a chef, somebody cooks. But I mean, yeah, it's different skills. You don't have to. Like, it's not super necessary, but it does help to have people that have some kind of skill that could help you, right, with maybe certain situations that could happen on route. I think for me, it's just part of my life. I mean, it's like something that I love to do. I mean, it's therapeutic for me mentally. It's good for you physically. You know what I mean? It can be a social thing, and you don't have to ride with people who are better than you, and people who aren't better than you can ride with you. So it's kind of part of your life and part of many people's lives, right? And everyone that I've talked to that have tried it, have never done it before, they absolutely love it. And it's just open to everyone, even if you have the, the coordination to ride on a 2-wheeler, you can go on like a tricycle bike or whatever, and now they have the electric bikes, right? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's just part of my life, and it's part of many people's lives, right? And to me, it's just happiness. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. It was a pleasure.
Of course.